Hi folks, we're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about immigration from India, and we could include in this the subcontinent like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and what was the other one, Nepal. You've got a situation where something like 70 to 80% of the population of that entire subcontinent area want to leave, that they want to get out. But where do they want to go? They want to go to the rich white countries. And unfortunately, and they've got this massive surplus population there. I mean, if you sort of include the peasants and the subsistence peasants, they've got unemployment rates that we can't even dream of in the way, can't even contemplate here. Unemployment rates are 65% and this sort of thing. So they've got a massive overpopulation there, surplus population, and the government in India and elsewhere around there is very motivated and very keen to get rid of that surplus population, push it out anywhere. And of course, the rich West is being imposed upon to take all these surplus population people, and the United Nations, the globalists, the NGOs, the World Economic Forum, they're all on board with this as well. And you've got this absurdity where Western politicians go to India and go on Indian television saying, oh, we need you workers. We've got no workers in the West at all. We've just got no one to do the work, and you have to come in large numbers. I mean, more lies and untruths and grotesque misrepresentations you wouldn't imagine, but that's the globalist mantra. Those are the globalist lies that are being pushed about and white people selling out their own fellow citizens. Now remember, there are more people in the subcontinent, that Indian subcontinent. There are more people in there that want to leave the subcontinent and come to the West. So there are more people that want to leave than as the entire white population of the world. So that'll just give you some idea of the scale of the people movement, or the intended people movement, and the possible effects and ramifications of those movements. So for every one white person in the world, there are 1.15 brown people just from the Indian subcontinent. That's before you get to Africa or the Middle East or China or anywhere else, just from there. So there's enough surplus people, and that's just a surplus, by the way. There's enough surplus people in that subcontinent to swamp the entire white Western world. And you've got to wonder if the globalists are looking at that going, wow, that's pretty good. Let's use them to crush the white populations that we want to eradicate anyway in our own countries, to clear the way for the globalist project. so just with that in mind, now I've got a history that having done business and doing business all over the world, and including with Indians and South Americans and everywhere, Asians. I've got a fairly broad view on these things. I've got no real axe to grind one way or another, but do I want got no real axe to grind one way or another, but do I want my own home and my own populations to be swamped by brown people for no reason other than there's some ideological hysteria that's been gripped, that has taken control of, or is being used by a small globalist elite? Then that I've got a problem with. But illegal migration to Australia, it's a long way to go from the refugee camps around Asia. It's quite a long way by sea, because Australia's an island, a long way by sea to get to Australia. So it's not easy. It takes quite a lot of organisation and so on. And for the people smugglers, it's kind of a large undertaking. But there was quite a lot of 20 to 25,000 a year, I think, illegals were arriving in Australia by boat, and paying some quite big money for it, and always having a preference for pregnant women to who are about to give birth. Talk about nothing organic about these things. And so the government stopped it with what was offshore processing. And it was a centre-right government, and it was condemned for being, you can imagine, fascist and Nazi and it was condemned for doing this. So, but the people, the illegals, were put on an offshore island, and they were told they could leave at any time. They were free to leave at any time they wanted, anytime. They were free to leave to go to a third country or back to their country of origin. But the globalist controlled, the globalist controlled media misrepresented this, that these people were being detained. They were being cruelly oppressed. They were kept behind razor wire with armed guards, beating them, killing, raping them. It was Hitler. But that was, in fact, nothing that they were getting. They were put up in air-conditioned premises. They were given medical, dental, free food, free entertainment, free phones, free computers, free everything. And they were free to leave at any time they wanted. But the globalist controlled media outrageously depicted this as some of the cruelest form of oppression imaginable. Armed guards, beating them, raping little girls. I mean, the depiction was absolutely insane. But again, they were free to leave at any time, but chose not to. So I don't know what can be done about illegal immigrants, illegal aliens arriving unlawfully and illegally. But let's just have a look at the moment. The biggest problem since Australia stopped the illegal boats coming, the primary, if not the sole source of illegal migration is people that arrive on tourist visas. And then as soon as the tourist visa has expired, they say, well, actually, I'm applying for asylum. And for reasons I don't fully understand, these people come from countries that are not at war and haven't been at war. And so they have to sort of concoct these quite fantastic stories. And you see the involvement of NGOs. So before they claim asylum, they go and have a talk with activist NGOs so that all their legal representation and everything is already set up and organised. So when they arrive to claim asylum, they've got, free lawyers in tow and documents ready to be filed, all filled out for free by these lawyers from the NGOs, the globalist NGOs. So the whole thing's an outrageous scam. For some reason, the Australian government's putting up with it. And just looking at some of the numbers, that it's close now to 100,000 people who've arrived illegally, just visa overstays. The thing that gets me here is if you fill out a form saying you're just a tourist, then you go, by the way, I've decided I'm a political refugee or a refugee seeking asylum. You've lied on your form. Now, if you lie on your form as you come into Australia, the government is allowed then to expel you on the basis that you lied on your form. If you want to apply for asylum, go through the proper channels, go to the embassy in India or wherever, go to the embassy and make your application there, or go through the proper refugee camp, NGO networks and UN networks and so on. Go through that procedure. But instead, they just arrive as tourists. They also magically happen to have relatives here, and they're just able to say, well, I'm seeking asylum. And that's it. Suddenly the government is paralysed. They can do nothing. Now, if you're a white person, you claim asylum, and you're out of the country real quick. But if you're a brown person or a black person, then suddenly the government's paralysed. They just can't get rid of you. So you're allowed to stay. You're given a temporary visa. You're given all sorts of benefits and handouts and so on. But nothing happens, and then years go by where it takes so long to process the legal case, where the illegal alien is getting free legal aid from these NGOs and so on, regardless of the merits or lack thereof of their case. And then they after they've been here for a few years, they then say, well, I've been here for a while, so you can't get rid of me, and I've married here or something like that. And in the meantime, they're able to bring over brides from overseas and all sorts of stuff. So it seems that there's absolutely no will at all to stop this. And in fact, it's de facto, I would say, de facto encouraged. So So why don't you just arrive, illegally on this basis, and then we'll pretend that we've got we're going through the legal motions to expel you or check your bona fides, but we're really not going to do it at all, and you can stay. It's just another form of immigration. So look, don't worry, just behave illegally, and that's all going to be okay with us. That appears to be the situation. But I hadn't realised that the numbers here, like the back the back numbers, are between 75 or between 80 and 100,000 asylum seekers, all who've had their applications turned down. So they're already been rejected, but somehow they still managed to stay in the country. But all their legal fees, everything is being paid for by these activist NGOs who claim to be charities. They're not fucking charities. They're activist NGOs. Yet some reason the government just can't shut them down. And if you want to, be an organisation that's formed to complain about illegal mass migration, then you're a fucking Nazi, you're fucking Hitler, and they shut you down quick, smart. The police are around and the security services are in there. But if you're an NGO pretending to be a charity, paying for the legal fees and the legal representation of all these illegal people, then and claiming to be a charity, that the government is powerless. They just can't stop you. Oh, the law won't let us, and so on. Suddenly, the letter of the law is very vitally important. Something I didn't realise was over the last several months, between 1,500 and 2,000 Indians are arriving in Australia every month, and on a tourist visa. But as soon as they arrive, they say, we're claiming asylum. From what? What are they claiming asylum from? So they're using all sorts of, again, they're ginned up and drilled and choreographed and stage managed by these activist NGOs. Well, say you're homosexual and you're going to be oppressed, and then as soon as they get their residency visa, they bring their wife and children out from India, these sorts of things. And there's no revisiting back. Well, hold on a minute. You're allowed to stay on the basis you are homosexual. Now you're saying you're not, and so we're rescinding your visa. That doesn't happen. It's just, again, I think it's all part of some elaborate dance macabre, some choreography where there's a pretense of going through a process, but in reality, it's no process at all. Just in the last several months, some 25,000 Indians have arrived, falsely, in my view, claiming asylum, but the government seems utterly powerless to do anything about it. There's no deterrent at all. Now, as these Indians arrive and tell their buddies that hey, guess what? I turned up at the airport. I just said I want asylum, and now I was greeted with open arms. And guess what? 5 minutes later, I'm allowed to stay indefinitely. So before you know it, everyone in the subcontinent is going to be jumping on a plane to come to Australia or the West. Now, I've got an obvious sort of problem with this, and I'm sure anybody would. If it's a genuine case of asylum, then go through the proper channels. But there doesn't appear to be any effort to make a genuine claim, or any effort by the government, the Australian government, to verify if the claim is genuine or not. These people clearly couldn't do it if they weren't hands held and given free legal advice and free legal aid all the way through. These so-called fake charities. If the government shut that loophole down, then I think they would shut down a vast amount of this illegal migration. But as long as these people can arrive in Australia and they know exactly where to go, who to call, and they're able to get, it was a video on this channel, YouTube, about an Indian guy skiting that the minute he arrives in Australia, he knows exactly who to call, where to go, and he can get same day service. Some lawyer, NGO lawyer, will be out straight away, ready to represent them and defend what? Defend illegality, or what is it? What are they defending? It's not a refugee, so why are they so super motivated and ginned up to support the illegal migration? They've got to wonder where that comes from. Who's ginning up the lawyers to see this as an absolute, first order priority to help illegals move around, from brown to white countries. Now, I think Indian immigration, apart from the sheer numbers involved and their desire to get rid of their surplus population, I think that's probably one of the biggest threats to the West. I mean, putting aside for the moment the insanity of the globalist cabal and the Indian migration, I think, is the biggest threat. People want to leave China, but not in those sort of numbers. But in India, the sheer scale of the people that want to leave the subcontinent, this includes Pakistan and Bangladesh, by the way, this sheer scale of the people who want to leave is just eye-watering. And I think that's the biggest threat to the white West that exists today. The scale of immigration. There's talk of the global star, it's Russia or it's Hungary or something like that, but that's only because they won't bow down to the globalist cabal. But the biggest threat to the white West, the white population, white culture, continuity of white civilization, the biggest threat, I think, comes from the subcontinent. Again, simply because of the sheer scale of numbers. But why do I say that? I mean, if Indians want to come in large numbers and integrate into Western society, who cares? I mean, what's the problem? But that's not how it is. So the Indian determination to maintain genetic purity is very strong. And again, Indians that emigrated to Fiji in the 1850s, as an example, or to South Africa in the 1840s and 1850s. Or other parts of Africa, because some of the east coast of Africa, there was trading companies there that were Indian, and they moved their parts of their families and populations over there to do the Indian business. Gandhi, for example, was a lawyer practicing in South Africa for a while for one of the family businesses. So Indians who've even emigrated or lived in other countries, white Western countries or elsewhere, from the 1840s and 50s onwards, they still have not integrated. They still see themselves as Indian. They want to maintain their Indian identity. They speak Indian in the house. They send back to India in the village of their ancestors for husbands and brides. They have absolutely no intention at all of integrating. And this comes to people who are living, Indians that came to Australia in quite small numbers at the time, in the 1960s, for example. And again, the very first tranche of mass migration Indians that came to Australia in the 1990s, typically the Brahmins at the time, and their children, children who were born here, and they've all those children, they all send back to India for brides and husbands, even though they're all born here. Even the Indians in Australia, at least, they frown on, quite severely actually, frown on their children if they want to marry other Indians that were born in Australia. They want to ensure that genetic, tribal, cultural purity, and the best way to do that is to make sure brides and husbands come from the subcontinent, directly from there. They don't even like intermarrying with the local born Indians. That is considered to be a polluting influence. So they're very determined to stay genetically pure and keep separate, in effect. Now, they'll take what the white society has to give. They'll take the jobs that the white society can deliver. They'll take the college degrees that they'll take everything they can. But when it comes to returning any benefit, then that's a very different view. And if they can possibly spend their money with other Indians, they will. It's only if they've got no choice will they deliver their services or their spend their money with the white populace. Even looking at quite a prominent Indian surgeon, in order to make the big bucks, he's got to operate on white people and work in white hospitals, run by white administrators, and get his degree from universities run by white people and employed by societies that are run by, he's going to do all that. I mean, he'll take what that has to, but his idea is that he's Indian. He wants his children, who are now sixth generation Western born, he still wants them to send back to the country of origin for wives and husbands. So the Indian just don't integrate, and because of that they create a sub society within a nation state. And already in Australia now, the Indians that are here are gloating that they'll be in the majority in this country, and they'll be deciding what goes and what doesn't go, and what the white people have to do and don't have to do. Similarly, even after they've been, because they live so separately, they've got this terrible chip on their shoulder. There's certainly most, I'm sure there's exceptions, but certainly the ones I've met, there's this terrible chip on their shoulder about that. It's not them rejecting white society; it's white society rejecting them, and they take the slightest offence, as being somehow anti-Indian or racist or against. They're allowed to be as racist as they want to white people, but if they detect even a smidgen of what they would perceive as racism in return, this is very, very sort of trembling need to be offended at every opportunity. Then they perceive that as racism, and they see that they're part of when we're in charge, we won't let those white people be racist to us. We'll fucking show them who's in charge. And that really comes across, and it's not it's a rather sobering thought of how the future might look if Indians do become the majority. But as they're already a sizable minority, but they expect special prove to us you're not racist, you damn white people. You have to give us our own representatives in Parliament. You have to give us, our own Indian special interests Indian representative in Parliament. We have to have special allowance. We must have a special Indian temple built. We must have this, must have that. And so they want to maintain their Indianness and their unique identity, and perceive it as something of an unspeakable outrage if they don't get it. That's proof that they're all racist against us, and they're ready to see that proof everywhere. So Indians aren't going to integrate. They don't want to intermarry. They don't want to become part of the wider economy. So this makes them, I think, a huge destabilizing force to Western societies. And that doesn't mean that some of them aren't pleasant and nice people. I was at a trade show recently where the exhibit that we had and the exhibit that the next door exhibit, the one directly adjacent, was an Indian film, and some very, very, very well dressed, very urbane, very sophisticated, very cultured Indians were on their trade show stand, and we were having a nice chat. And they're pleasant enough people. If you want to talk about the Socrates and the philosophy of this, that, and the next thing, then they're quite pleasant to talk to. I've got no objection, and one of them was an expert on Depression era British movies, and I knew a little bit about that, so we were able to discuss that. It was a pleasant discussion, and we sat down, had a coffee together, and all this sort of stuff. So it was all fine, but that doesn't change anything. That guy is going to, he only wants his kids to be Indian. He doesn't want them to marry or something. And it was a pleasant chat. But beyond that sort of superficiality, he's Indian 100% and doesn't want to step outside of that. So this makes the Indian diaspora this massive destabilizing force for the West. And until the Western governments, I mean, the globalists may want it that way, I suspect they do, but we really need to wake up to this and to say, no, okay, you've got a massive surplus population, you've got a basket case economy, and but that's your problem to sort out. You're not going to export your surplus population away from India to try and create some greater element of political, social stability at home, but export your social instability and destabilizing forces to the West. But I don't think any Western government, particularly not given they're all globalist controlled, will actually fight that fight. Being a Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.